Hey guys, Sacdaddy here with another anime review. I enjoyed doing my Origairu one, even though it was quite a bland video. So I'm deciding to do another one on a more popular anime, probably more well known. It's Angel Beats. Angel Beats is ranked 5th in popularity, according to my anime list popularity rankings. Even though it is really popular, it is very short anime, with only 13 episodes and a small epilogue. You're looking at about 5.5 hours of pure binge time if you're watching start to finish. Now, Angel Beats is an action comedy drama with a little bit of romance thrown in, set in a supernatural purgatory setting for children who led tragic lives or had tragic deaths. Now, in this review, I'm going to be breaking down the plot. I'm going to be looking at character development. I'm going to be looking at the events that happen throughout. And we're going to see all the things that make this such a great anime, as well as some of the things that detract it from becoming an even greater one. Let's get started. The first thing this anime has going for it is the musical introductory sequence. It starts off with a beautiful piano and violin sequence that draws you in to the scenic overlays that are shown throughout the introduction. I always listen to that every episode before skipping through the rest of the intro. Now, moving on to what else the introduction shows, I think the most significant thing it shows is at the very end when it shows Kanade, also known as Tenshi, having angel wings as she plays the piano. Now, I think this is actually foreshadowing more than just her getting angel wings later in the show. I think that this is actually showing the viewer that Kanade is not the true antagonist of the show. Because 3/4 of the show is basically an effort and a struggle against Tenshi. Now, what truly happens is the viewer finds out that Tenshi is just a conduit for the protagonist's salvation, and basically the whole show was a huge misunderstanding. And I think that the introduction showing her having angel wings is foreshadowing of all of that. Now, it's a little bit of a stretch, but I think that showing her as an angel shows that she doesn't have any true antagonistic intentions. She's good-natured at heart, evil clones withstanding. And I think that is the main plot point to take from the introduction. So the first and most important protagonist is Otonashi Yuzuru. Otonashi is the character that the story is told through his perspective. Now, Yuzuru is a very plain guy, and you don't learn much about him until about the middle of the series when he is mind-controlled to remember his past. Now, he's a pretty average guy. Nothing really stands out about him. He blunders his way through the purgatory, dying a couple times on his way figuring everything out. And by dying, I mean he gets hit pretty hard and then has to wake up again, because obviously you can't die in purgatory, you're already dead. Now, Otonashi kind of struggles dealing with everybody else there, because everyone else is a pretty eccentric personality, and he is kind of the straight man of the series. Now, Otonashi ends up being a conduit of salvation due to understanding Tenshi. That is his primary role in the story. Now, I'll get more into that when I delve further into the plot, but Otonashi is who the story centers around. The second main character is going to be Yuri Nakamura. Now, Yuri is the leader of the Afterlife Battlefront. She is probably the second most important character, just due to how involved she is in the plot, the overall arcing plot. I would say that Hinata is a close runner-up, maybe even ahead in terms of screen time and how she actually affects Otonashi and the effect of the overall plot. because Hinata has a lot more screen time and affects Otonashi more so than Yuri does. But Yuri is integral to the plot. A lot of it revolves around her. She had a very unfortunate break-in in her house, which led to the death of her three siblings, which she has immense guilt over, which is why she is here in purgatory. Now, the thing about Yuri is she's angry at God, basically. She is just like, how could this have happened to me? Life isn't fair, and she's not really willing to give up on those emotions, which is why she's been in purgatory for so long. She just cannot forgive and forget. She's stuck in these old memories that are haunting her forever. She has nightmares about her dead siblings. She's pretty emotionally stricken right now and is basically just avoiding her problems by going on with this little masquerade battle against Tenshi. Following Yuri, Hideki Hinata is probably the most integral character to the plot. He kind of takes over this role as Otonashi's best friend. They go through a lot of things together. He's a great comic relief character, kind of taking the fall for other people in certain situations to make everyone laugh. He's kind of shown as having a lot of charisma, and that charisma ends up being a farce. He ends up being a very uncharismatic guy. Now, Hinata is very important because he was potentially the first person to get obliterated. But due to the intervention of Yui and Otonashi, he ends up staying all the way through to the end. Now, Hinata helps Otonashi in the end to resolve the feelings of everyone else and get them on the road to salvation. Hinata is one of my favorite characters of this show just due to his comic relief. He's hilarious in all the stuff he goes through. He's probably my favorite character of the show. Now you've got Kanade, also known as Tenshi. She is the main antagonist for 3/4 of the show. She is shown as being this unstoppable force, as shown through the second episode of The Guild. She gets through all the traps the Guild places, which kill most of the squad, and she just kind of walks through it all. For some reason, she's got this god status in purgatory, although she is just a girl, and the reason she's there I'll discuss when I'm talking about the plot, but is a quite trivial reason and is very confusing. Now, Kanade is shown to have almost no emotion. If you've ever watched Sakura So anime, she's kind of like Mashiro Shina in that sense, and she really doesn't show any emotion. She just kind of says, like, okay, like, oh, I like this food, or guard skill, hand sonic. Like, she's just like a robot, which I believe is why there's a good reason for Yuri to believe that she's evil, because she doesn't act like a human being. But she is a main character, and basically the entire plot of the show revolves around her. Like, it's all centered around Tenshi and everyone's actions due to her. Now, someone who's not a main character, but I believe deserves an honorable mention, is Yui. Yui is the replacement singer for GDM, the high school band that they use to distract the NPCs to get away with all their different little tricks and traps. Now, Yui plays a huge role in Otonashi and Hinata's character development through the series, and she plays a pretty big role in the overarching salvation plot or theme that the show has. She's in the show enough to, I believe, be a main character rather than supporting, just due to her screen time and how she affects the story so much more than the other supporting characters. Now, Yui had a very tragic life, living as a paralyzed girl for her whole life, watching kids do all these things on TV and wishing she could do them too. This translates to her personality in purgatory being extremely bubbly and happy-go-lucky. She's constantly doing things, constantly out, being active. super hyper, and this is because during life she couldn't do any of that. So I'm not going to go through the entire supporting cast because there are so many of them, but one character I do want to give an honorable mention to is TK. TK is kind of the mysterious guy that doesn't really say much throughout the series, except random English phrases that don't really pertain to what's going on. One of my favorite lines he says is, "Crazy baby." It's just, he just says it. There's no reason. It really adds to the comedy just because I think it's absolutely absurd that this guy is just randomly saying English phrases in a Japanese show. Okay, so a quick description of the plot is basically Otonashi wakes up in purgatory, doesn't realize it's purgatory. Tenshi proves to him he can't die. He discovers the battlefront, ends up joining them. They discover the guild, which is where their guns are created from dirt. Otonashi assists them in several little plots to fuck with the NPCs, to get their lunch tickets, and to screw with Tenshi. Through a series of events, they shame Tenshi into not becoming student council president in an attempt to alleviate their problems with her. They say, hey, if she loses her status, she won't be a problem anymore. They do that, and Naoi Ayato ends up becoming acting student council president. This guy's a fucking nutter. He has a god complex and is full of hate and rage. Ends up locking Otonashi and Tenshi up, who were hanging out eating lunch together, because Otonashi realized Tenshi wasn't all that bad. She was just misunderstood. So now they're locked in a prison by Mr. Crazy God Complex. They end up escaping due to some ingenious use of Tenshi's guard skill Hand Sonic. When they come out, Ayato, Mind Control Man, has basically killed the entire battlefront. And they're like, well, shit, we need some help. With the aid of Tenshi, they end up fighting. Otonashi ends up hugging Mind Control Man. He says, you know what, I love you for who you are. And, you know, it's okay. We're here in the moment together. Ayato has a mental breakdown that somebody actually likes him, even though he's a piece of shit. And then he ends up joining the battlefront. Now, Tenshi is not a problem. Ayato is not a problem. What happens next is they end up having a great time together. They go fishing. It's a pretty good story. Everyone's happy, lovey-dovey after huge conflict. And then they find out Yuri gets assaulted by Tenshi. They say, well, how's that possible? She's been here fishing with us. Turns out Tenshi's got shitloads of evil clones. The evil clones end up just all over the place, and the guild has to rescue good Tenshi from the evil Tenshis. So they end up going down to the guild, the old guild, where good Tenshi is being held by evil Tenshis, and they basically get through them just by throwing people at them. Every member of the battlefront ends up taking on a Tenshi and basically falling on her sword to get past. It gets to the very end, and Otonashi ends up finding Tenshi, and due to a change in the code of one of her guard skills that Yuri implemented, Otonashi gets Tenshi to absorb all her evil clones. So she does that, ends up going into some sort of coma. Otonashi falls asleep at her bedside. She wakes up. It's good Tenshi again. Yay, everything's great. No, wait, what's happening now? There are shadow people, NPCs, which are the random characters assorted to make the school life seem real, are now turning into evil shadow guys that'll take you over and turn you into an NPC. So now the goal is to stop the shadows. What they do is they find out that computers are being stolen from the computer lab. Yuri assumes that this is done for Angel Player, which is being used to turn the characters into shadows. So they go on a quest to find out what's going on. Yuri ends up finding out where it's all being held. Tenshi helps them get there. It's a huge group effort. Yuri ends up finding the room where all the NPCs are being turned into shadow people. Ends up talking to the NPC who's been turning other NPCs into shadow people on behalf of the creator of Angel Player, the software Tenshi uses for her special skills. Turns out Angel Player was a guy who was stuck in purgatory, and he fell in love, and then realized that you can't be in love in purgatory or else it ends up being an eternal paradise, which I guess he wasn't okay with. So he ends up turning himself into an NPC and then leaving the Angel Player software for others to use who end up. Yuri finds out that she could essentially become God with this software and the use of it, and decides against it. This is kind of her redeeming moment. She accepts what has gone on with her life, and she's ready to move on finally. So she destroys all the monitors in the room, which somehow destroys all the CPU towers, and then all the shadow people are now back to regular people. Now, what happens is, as the shadow battles were going on, Otonashi was helping all his buddies be obliterated. And by obliterated, he essentially found out that it's their salvation through talking with Tenshi. He realizes that she just wanted people to find their salvation, to do what they came there to do, and to move on to the next life. He started with Yui and moved on from character to character. At the point of the end shadow battle, where Yuri realizes she can become a god, there's only about 5 of them left. There is Otonashi, Hinata, Yuri, Ayato, and Tenshi. So all 5 of them end up going back to the school, and they have a graduation ceremony. Ayato, Mind Control Man, is the first to go. He says, "Oh, thank you, Otonashi, for giving me a hug. I feel great now." He gets obliterated and sent into the afterlife. Next is Yuri. She says, "Oh, I accept what happened with my siblings and them getting murdered brutally. I'm okay with that now." They move on. The next person is Hinata. He says, "All right, man, get Tenshi out of here. You got this. It was good knowing you." And he zips out. Then Otonashi talks with Tenshi. He says he loves her, and she says, "Oh, hey, I'm the girl who your heart transplant went to, because when Otonashi died, he made sure he was an organ donor, and his heart ended up going into Tenshi." I'm still confused as to how Tenshi got into purgatory then, if she was the recipient of his heart transplant. Maybe she's still in a coma from when she got the transplant. It's really unclear. But he says, "I love you, don't leave me." She says, "Say I love you again." He does. She gets obliterated into the afterlife or back into her body. It's unclear. It was a very ambiguous point in the story for me. Maybe I was just missing something, but you don't really know if she's actually alive, or maybe she got the heart transplant but then died somehow anyway. So now it's Otonashi there alone. The epilogue is Otonashi talking to a guy who's here in purgatory. He realizes that the school setting is a farce, and Otonashi is now the school student president and is basically taking over Tenshi's role in assuming the path to salvation for everyone. That is the plot to the show. It ends up being kind of nonsensical. So let's go with what I didn't like about the series. And that's mainly the plot. Now, I liked the setting, I liked the ideas behind the plot, but I didn't like the way they were implemented. Now, I think that the swap from the entire series being against Tenshi, to Tenshi being okay, but her evil clones being evil, to now it's shadow people that are being controlled by the reminiscence of an old guy who was in love once. I think that was a little far-fetched. I think it was a little nuts. I think they could have stuck with the Tenshi plot line. I don't think they needed the whole shadow people. I understand that played a role in some of the events that they wanted to occur, but I think it could have been done throughout the Tenshi plot line. I understand this was based on a visual novel. I don't know how the articulation from visual novel to anime played out, if it was a good rendition or not, but I didn't really like the way the plot worked. I thought it could have been a lot more streamlined and easier to follow. I just felt that the events were kind of one after the other, and there wasn't really a connection between Shadow People and Tenshi battles and Evil Tenshi. So that was kind of a negative for me. So one thing about the anime that I didn't like as well was that I didn't have enough time to get a connection with the characters. This is a very sad anime, even though it's a comedy. It deals with a lot of tragedy and heartbreak throughout. But I didn't feel that I got enough of a look at the characters to really feel bad for them. You see them go through some horrible shit, but I don't have enough screen time and build up with the characters because of how short the anime is to really get an emotional connection with the characters. I just don't feel that bad when I see Yuri's 3 siblings die. Like, yeah, that's probably the worst thing that happened to you, but I don't really know enough about you to feel that heartbreak. That's a pretty cold thing to say, but I really wish they would have maybe doubled the length of this anime and focused a lot more on the characters rather than the situations they're put in. Even just conversations between them would make such a difference in feeling connected to them. Characters like Sheena, you almost never really see them in the show anyway, and the only thing they do is for a comedic opportunity. So I feel that more time with the characters would have been extremely beneficial to a sad anime, just due to the fact that you really want to feel connected to actually feel sad. Now the positive. There are a lot of positives to this anime, and I did enjoy it. Even though the plot was subpar, the comedy was great. I laughed quite a bit watching this anime. I thought the characters were well defined. I thought that the comedic timing was done well. I like the idea behind the anime, this purgatory for tragic children. I thought that was great. I thought it was interesting. It was different. The comedy is probably the number one in this anime. It had me laughing quite a bit, between TK saying "crazy baby" to fucking the guy catching baseballs while eating a bowl of ramen. Like, that shit was great. Like, it was ridiculous. As well as Yui doing her stupid neon cat thing, and then Hinata putting her in a chokehold because he says he hates that shit. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was funny. It made the show. I also really like the way the characters are defined. Each character has a very distinct personality. Even the ones who don't get much screen time, you can tell they act how they act because they have set personalities. There's no wishy-washy characters outside of the NPCs. So that was great. Between Nodu being just crazy, Hinata being the jokester, Yui getting headlocked and being upbeat, Yuri being extremely serious, TK saying random fucking shit in English. The characters well defined, the interactions between them very good. Another good thing I really liked was the setting, the idea behind it, the purgatory for tragic children and no one can die, allowed them to really explore some of the more emotional sides of terrible shit. And it also helped with the comedic timing. Allowing nobody to die allowed people to engage in pretty ridiculous things that happen, like Nodu getting hit out the window by a trap designed to protect them from Tenshi. It was great because he can get hit by a giant hammer, live, we can laugh our asses off. So overall, I really enjoyed the anime. I thought it was funny. I thought it was worth my time. And it was definitely a show worth watching. It had me clicking the next episode every time one was over, and I did binge it in just about 5 hours. I recommend this anime to anyone who likes Japanese comedy, because I thought it was pretty funny. There's a lot of physical humor, and it had me laughing quite a bit. So I'm gonna rate this one probably an 8 out of 10. I thought it was definitely funny, and the comedy overtook the subpar plot and some of the subpar character development. So if you were thinking about watching this, definitely have it a go. It's definitely worth it. Although don't go in expecting, great things out of the story. Just kind of accept it for what it is, as a good comedy. All right, guys, that's it, and fuck outros.